The Black Lives Matter may be the largest movement in U.S. history. The recent Black Lives Matter protests peaked on June 6 when 500,000 people turned out in nearly 550 places across the United States. That was a single day. More than a month of protests that still continue today. For recent polls suggest that about 15 to 26 million people in the United States have participated in demonstrations over the death of George Floyd and others in the recent weeks. These figures make the recent protests the largest movement in the country's history, according to interviews with scholars and crowd counting experts. I've never seen self-reports of protest participation that high for a specific issue over such a short period said Neil Carney, associate professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who studies social movements in the United States. It's possible that more people that said they protested than actually did. Even if half told the truth, the surveys suggest that more than 7 million people participated in recent demonstrations. The Women's March of 2017 had a turnout of about 3 million to 5 million people on a single day, but that was a highly organized event. Collectively, the recent Black Lives Matter protests, more organic in nature, appear to have far surpassed those numbers according to these two polls. Really, it's hard to overstate the scale of this movement, said Deva Woodley, an associate professor at politics at the New School. Professor Woodley also said that civil rights marches in the 1960s were considerably smaller in number. If we added up all those protests during the period, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, but not millions. Protests to unseat government leadership for independence typically succeed when they involve 3.5% of the population at their peak, according to a review of international protests by Erica Sennenworth, a professor at Harvard Kennedy School who co-directs the crowd counting consortium, which collects data on crowd sizes of political protests. Why this movement is different. An amalgamation of estimates from organizers, the police, and local news reports often make up the official total. But tallies of teams of crowd counters are revealing numbers of extraordinary scale. On June 6th, for example, at least 50,000 people turned out in Philadelphia, 20,000 in Chicago's Union Park, and up to 10,000 on the Golden Gate Bridge, according to estimates by Edward Chow, an associate professor at Texas State University, and researchers at the crowd counting consortium. Across the United States, there have been more than 4,700 demonstrations on average 140 per day. Since the first protest began in Minneapolis on May 26th, according to the Times analysis, turnout has ranged from dozens to tens of thousands in about 2,500 small towns or larger cities. The geographic spread of protest is a really important characteristic and helps signal the depth and breadth of a movement support, said Kenneth Andrews, a sociology professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. One of the reasons protests in so many places in the United States is there have been protests in so many places in the United States is the backing of organizations like Black Lives Matter. While the group isn't necessarily directing each progress, it provides material, guidance, and framework for new activists. Professor Woodley said, those activists are taking to social media to quickly spread protest details to a wide audience. Black Lives Matter around the world has been around since 2013, but there's been a big shift in public opinion about the movement as well as broader support for recent protests. A deluge of public support from organizations like the NFL and NASCAR for Black Lives Matter may also have encouraged supporters who typically would sit out on the sidelines to get involved. Protests may also be benefiting from a country that is more conditioned to protesting. The adversarial stance that Trump administration has taken on issues like gun violence, climate change, and immigration has led to more protests than under any other presidency since the Cold War. According to a poll from the Washington State and the Kaiser Family Foundation, 1 in 5 Americans said that they had participated in protests since the start of the Trump administration. 19% said that they were new to protesting. More than 40% of countries in the United States, at least 1,360, have had a protest. Unlike with past Black Lives Matter protests, nearly 95% of countries that had a protest recently are majority white, and nearly 3/4 of the countries are more than 75% white. Without gainsaying the reality of significance of generalized white support from the movement in the early 1960s, the number of whites who were active in the sustained way in the struggle were comparatively few, and certainly nothing like the percentages that we have seen taking part in recent weeks, said Douglas McAdam, an emeritus professor at Stanford University who studies social movements. According to the Civi's Analytics poll, the movement appears to have attracted protesters who are younger and wealthier. The age group with the largest share of protesters was around 3,500, was under 35, and the income group with the largest share of protesters was those earning more than $150,000 a year. Half of those who said that they protested said that this was their first time getting involved with a form of activism or demonstration. A majority said that they watched a video of police violence toward protesters or the Black community within the last year, and of those people, half said that is what made them more supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement.